Good morning. My name is Matt Flagler, F like Frank, L-A-G-L-E-R, Assistant Fire Chief, Cincinnati Fire Department. This morning at about 3:30 a.m., we had fire companies dispatched to multiple locations, both under and on the I-471 bridge. We had different reports. Some reports said a car fire, some reports said an outdoor fire. The initial arriving unit for us was our Cincinnati Engine 5 from over the Rhine, and they found a fire in what is a very large playground structure that's underneath the I-471 bridge. It's part of the Sawyer Point Smale Park complex. That playground was heavily involved in fire, and the fire actually transmitted to the bridge structure of the I-471 bridge. There's some netting and some equipment underneath that bridge that also caught on fire. The fire to the playground was extinguished relatively quickly by the firefighters. However, the fire that was on the bridge is pretty complex, and it has done some damage to the structural steel that's on that bridge. So we have closed the I-471 bridge right now in both directions. We're working with both the Ohio Department of Transportation and the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet right now, making an assessment of that bridge. I don't have any timelines for you on how long that's going to take. We're working with those engineers right now. The bridge itself remains closed in both directions, probably through the morning rush hour at least, and then we'll let everybody know. The current steps is to work with those engineers to make sure we can complete the extinguishment of the fire safely, and then to look at next steps for the engineers and the construction company. There was a contractor that was doing work on the Kentucky side of the bridge. They were not impacted by this, and we don't think they had played any role in that right now. We don't know the cause of the fire. The fire is under investigation, and we don't have any injuries at this time, although we're making a good assessment here. We have some unhomed people that live in this area. We do not know if they were affected yet, and we'll continue our assessment with them in the daylight.
And so you're saying there was 2 different fires and it's all under investigation. There were reports that a car went off the bridge and a bunch of different things.
Yeah, there was one fire, and it was the fire to this playground complex. But because of the nature of the fire in the dark, people called 911 and gave us different reports, but we believe it was completely isolated to the underneath the bridge area.
So the fire caused damage to the bridge. Does it remain closed because it is unsafe to drive on?
We do not know if it's unsafe or not. We're having engineers from the Department of Transportation make that assessment, but to be, completely safe, we wanted to close the bridge until we can make a good assessment with those engineers.
And just for viewers that are just now joining us, you said 2 fires under the bridge and on top of the bridge.
There was one fire, and it was under the bridge. It transmitted onto the bridge. It caught the bridge decking itself on fire from underneath. So it's the same fire, it just extended upward. I-471 is closed in both directions all the way through the morning rush for sure.
How tricky is it to navigate a fire like this?
It was complex because we had a multiple level fire. It required a response of almost 60 firefighters to the scene. It's a lot of work, but we're prepared to do what we need to do to help the public.
And no injuries?
No injuries, yes, so far.
Any leads on what started this fire?
No, our fire investigators are on scene. We're taking a good look right now, but we won't know anything till later today.
So no timelines right now?
No timelines yet.
Was that a truck of some sort underneath there that was burning? Or?
Not to my knowledge. Right now we think it was just the playground structure. In daylight we'll get some more imagery and we'll get a little bit better understanding of exactly what happens.
Explosions were?
I do not know.
Is there a lot of trees around this playground too that got caught fire?
There's some vegetation in that. I don't know how much was impacted there or not.
Are you able to paint the picture of what this looked like? We're getting a lot of reports.
Yeah.
This was quite the sight.
It was quite a bit of fire just because it was outside and it was spread out over a wide area. It looked pretty dramatic when the first arriving fire companies got on the scene.
It's Chief Flagler?
That's right, yes.
All right.
Where I'm at is at Sawyer Point, Yateman's Cove. And, we've been talking all morning about the elements that contributed to this fire, but I spoke with CPD officers asking what exactly started this fire. He said it's going to be a long time before they're able to give that answer. Lots of crews down here. In fact, I'm going to take a step aside so you guys can see this vantage point that we have here right under the bridge. I'm about, honestly, only 30 feet away. You can see some of the sparks coming off the plate playground right here. I know that crews have been coming over here, firefighters have been coming over here to put out some of those hot spots. We're still seeing them over here. This playground, just for some of you guys, for some of the perspective, those popular tennis courts, those popular pickleball courts, those are directly behind this area. But take a look up. This is what we're talking about here. Look at the bridge. This is the Daniel Carter Bridge. I've seen a lot of firefighters. I've seen a lot of officers coming through here, pacing with their flashlights above right where this is and really just walking down the line. I know we have a lot of questions about that, right? And there's a lot of questions about transportation as well. But take a look. This is the video of what we saw when we arrived here on scene. Now, we know officers said that they're treating this as a hazmat situation. They're treating it that way because they don't know what blew up to ignite this fire. And right above there, you can see that's 471, directly above the bridge. You can see just that amount of smoke that was above there. That was that smoke that you were able to see in that video. That is what we were smelling here.
Is actually closer to the scene in terms of being kind of at that nexus of where the bridge is really. But where we are here, what's incredible is that even from this distance, you're still able to see that fire damage. Now, by the time I got down here, the fire was out. Certainly not the case when Peyton made her way here this morning. But this is honestly still a bit of a chaotic scene, as you know, officers, fire crews still working, still trying to secure the scene as well. The incident command center also still here. Firefighters currently stationed underneath the bridge, just a few yards from where we are right now.
That breaking news right now: the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge, or the Big Mac Bridge, is shut down this morning after an initial vehicle fire.
That's right. We have team coverage this morning.
This is what's left of the playground. Now that the sun has come up, you're able to get more of a view of what that looks like. You know, when we first arrived hours ago, it was hard for me to even determine that this was, in fact, the playground that so many people pass by. And also, just for perspective, so you guys can get an idea, what's right behind it are those pickleball and tennis courts. You can still see some of the smoke there, and earlier this morning you were seeing lots of firefighters just working on some of those hot spots. But what I want you guys to do is to take a look up at the top right there of the bridge. That's where we saw firefighters and CPD officers just pacing back and forth with flashlights pointed up at the top there. That is that's what we're looking at, and right above that, as you guys know, that's 471 directly above. And I want to show you guys some video of what we saw when we first arrived, because I know I'm showing you the aftermath right now, some of this damage, but this is the video that we saw when we arrived on scene. That smoke just blanketing 471 directly above the bridge, and you can see just the expansion of those flames just bellowing under that bridge. Now, I know that there's still a lot of questions left unanswered. We've been seeing a couple of people. I've seen a couple of runners, a couple of walkers who've come up and asked, because they came up here, they saw the caution tape, they asked questions. But aside from that, not many people over here. I know the crews have been working hard to keep things roped off, keep things blocked off, just for safety precautions as they continue to investigate this. This is something we're going to be keeping an eye on for you. For now, though, I'm going to send it back to you.
Yeah, Peyton, I'll take it from here. So, you know, one of the things that when we first got on scene that they had to do that was absolutely imperative to the investigation, they had to simply secure the scene. That included moving us from underneath the bridge. That's actually where the media was initially told to go when they arrived here this morning. So we thought at that point that we were a safe distance away from the fire and from those points of kind of those smoldering points, those hot spots that kept popping up this morning. This little gap here right underneath the bridge there is still shut down. Fire crews still back there, and actually it's still smoldering, believe it or not, all these hours later. So we're still going to be out here, and again, hopefully get more information. All that I've been able to see, though, just from our vantage point, is just beneath this actual bridge itself. So I've not been able to initially, or I should say from where I'm standing, I have not been able to see anything that would confirm or deny a multi-vehicle accident. However, again, when you're talking about how hot it got in order for it to actually warp steel, that's one of the things, that's one of the big questions. That's the question we're talking about, is what even could have caused that, because an accelerant of some sorts, I mean, would be imagined here. But again, I'll keep checking.
All right, Jordan, appreciate that. Just a simple question there, because absolutely it was reported initially as a vehicle crash, but you've got a lot of leaves on the ground. You have dry wood with that playground there. It wouldn't take a lot to set that thing up. And of course, the flames did do some damage, as we now know, to the Ohio end of the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge. Daniel Carter Beard will remain closed indefinitely. Some of that debris that was falling off of there, our videographer capturing there.
That's right. It is closed after an early morning fire, approaching nearly 5 hours now. Sending things back out to Peyton Marshall. And Peyton, where you are, we're seeing that fire reignite.
Yeah, you're seeing it. We've been talking about the hot spots all morning. I'm going to take a step aside. You guys can see those flames already behind me. Just right here, I am at Yeatman's Cove, and right here at the park, you can see this, where this fire is taking place, where you're seeing those flames just bellow out. This is where the park was. When I was here earlier this morning, when I first arrived, and keep in mind, this is a location that I am very familiar with. It took me a while to even put together that this was the park, because just these flames that you're seeing an example of it right now, but these hot spots, fire crews have been working tirelessly to put these out. Now, we do know that there is structural damage to the steel of the bridge. That's what we've learned from investigators. Earlier this morning, I was also talking about things falling from the bridge. You were actually able to see it. You were able to hear it. We've learned that it's spalling, which is actual concrete that is burned at a high temperature. So just in speaking of those temperatures, you can see there's another hot spot, actually, as I'm watching this. There's another hot spot to the left of these flames that we're seeing. And I know the questions that a lot of you guys have is about the bridge, right? Well, take a look above. You are able to see the pictures that we've been seeing this morning, the videos that we've been seeing this morning. This is what the bridge, this is the aftermath of the bridge. I've seen fire crews, I've seen police officers pacing here with flashlights, looking up at that structural damage that we now know have been confirmed. I know there's still a lot of questions about just how this fire was ignited. We're still working to learn just the details of that. I know we have a lot of elements, but there's still a lot to investigate. Just behind me, you can see those fire crews. They're back at it again to put out another hot spot. And you know what? This isn't the only view. We've got Jordan, who's also on this. Jordan, from my understanding, you're able to see these flames as well, correct?
Yeah, Peyton, about 2 minutes ago, I started saying to our producer, come to us, because of this here behind me. This really, within the past 5 minutes, this fire here kind of at the base of where we've been standing all morning. First, we just saw it really smoldering, and then within a couple of minutes, it kind of evolved into what you're seeing right now. So Peyton, I'm not really sure exactly where your vantage point is at this moment, but I know now firefighters now approaching this fire once more, putting more water on it here this morning. Because, I mean, I'll tell you what, the wind isn't even that strong here, but just in terms of how quickly it can come up and really then begin to evolve in terms of the fire itself. That's why they moved us. That's why they have completely blocked off this road. Caution tape, investigation tape, I should say, for the red, speaking to the red tape down there. But teams of investigators now on the scene here this morning, continuing to analyze this, and then waiting for teams, obviously, from the Ohio Department of Transportation to get on scene as well. Our Mike Shell isn't that far from where we're standing here right now. Again, kind of at the nucleus of all of this here this morning, watching this evolve and really kind of, again, it's pretty incredible here this morning, as many of us are still trying to wonder exactly what even caused this. What was the genesis of this that has then led this many hours later to those hot spots that big popping up here behind us. For now, though, I'll send it back to you guys in the studio, and hopefully I'll be able to get some answers here in the next few minutes.
I did speak with Matt Bruning with ODOT just a short while ago. He is on his way to Cincinnati, and I asked him what could have burned hot enough to warp the beams on the underside of the bridge. He said that ODOT engineers are on site to take a look, and they won't know until they meet up with Cincinnati fire investigators. Now, we heard early this morning about some debris falling from the bridge, and Matt Bruning says what that is he believes is actually called spalling. That's when concrete burns at a specific temperature and actually flakes or chips off. We've actually seen that to some degree at the Western Hills Viaduct. A different set of circumstances, though. That's when water gets behind the concrete. That is not due to fire, but you see concrete that falls off here. So we're waiting for ODOT to come on site and to give us any kind of idea.
This morning at approximately 03:30, we were dispatched to a fire down here at Sawyer Point.
Hours before sunrise, a blaze in the east woke the first responders of Cincinnati. Flames funneled up from Thousand Hands Playground and swirled around the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge.
The heat from that fire actually transmitted up and caught some of the materials that are part of that bridge on fire. There's some electrical conduit, some construction netting, and some other features that we think caught on fire.
What sparked it is unknown, but wood chips and airflow created that tower of fire. Hours of battling finally ended the fire, but the damage left behind is undeniable.
There's been a lot of spalling, there's been a lot of structural integrity compromising.
Spalling is when concrete will flake and break apart. The Ohio Department of Transportation has already hired Great Lakes Construction on an emergency contract to begin assessing damage and repairing that bridge.
We've got at least three of the girders that will need to be replaced. The deck above those girders will also need to be replaced. And there's a sign truss up there that you might be able to see from here that is severely compromised. That needs to be removed and replaced as well.
Traffic detoured to Cincinnati's other bridges was already clogged up by rush hour.
Our detour will be I-71 and I-75 south.
ODOT officials say the bulk of the damage is to the southbound side of the bridge, which will at least be closed for several weeks, if not longer. All but one lane of the northbound side reopened around 9 p.m. So now fire officials and police investigate the cause.
We're having great cooperation from Cincinnati Police and some of our federal partners to make sure that we have a thorough investigation.
Construction crews and ODOT will assess damage and begin repairs. The people of the tri-state just need to steer clear.
Those closures are in place for a reason.
Most of the traffic that was stopped up was actually headed towards the right. So not only were they in that one, they were headed towards another one headed towards Covington side of things. So that's already something that's going to slow people up. And that's, in fact, what they're designed to do, is to slow down traffic, but keep it kind of moving. I will say that was the one good thing about it, is that I never ended up bumper to bumper stopped. People made sure that they were actually moving the whole time. So it's just going to be a matter of being patient if you're on that bridge.
Of that massive fire underneath the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge from overnight. You can see some of the smoldering aftermath of that. We can tell you that all lanes of I-471 are closed after that fire started at the Thousand Hands Playground, then spread up to the Big Mac Bridge around 3:30 this morning. There is structural damage.
This fire was like something we have not seen. I don't remember a fire like this ever in Cincinnati.
The fire chief said they had 60 firefighters on the scene here. They were really focusing on the 1,000 Acres Playground. That's the playground between the pickleball courts and the Yateman's Cove, the large open space. And the flames were so large that they expanded 40 feet in the air, catching the bottom part of the bridge on fire. ODOT says they're going to have to replace 3 highway beams as well as the highway sign that Tanya just mentioned. And because of that, they're going to need to do the deck of the highway, replace that as well. The focus right now for the emergency crews that are on the scene is the cause of that fire. They're looking at the playground and the materials that playground is made out of. A bunch of different synthetic materials. You've got some plastics, you've got some woods, there's also some rubber, there's a mulch in that area. So they're looking at all of that to determine a cause, but haven't found one yet. That is what they're working on today. Take a listen to what the fire chief told us just a bit ago about how the damage to the bridge actually occurred. The good news here, if there is any, is that there was no damage to any of vehicles that were traveling on top of the bridge at the time. There was no hazardous materials, as far as they know, that was released. There was no impact to any utilities in the area. And there was no injuries to any of the firefighters who were here. But this is the very beginning of a very long investigation and a very big headache for a lot of drivers.
We were peppering the fire chief with what caused this. What is your investigation showing? Obviously, very, very new investigation. They won't even commit to, was this started by a human being? Was this an electrical issue or not? What we can tell you, it was very damaging and it was extremely hot. Andrew, thanks so much.
This morning at approximately 03:30, we were dispatched to a fire down here at Sawyer Point. at Thousand Hands Playground. We had several units dispatched. We had 3 fire engines, a fire truck, a district chief, and a heavy rescue. And we're glad to report that there were no injuries from this fire. Assistant Chief Matthew Flagler assumed command very early in this fire, and we'll talk about the specifics surrounding what occurred.
Good morning, my name is Matt Flagler, Assistant Fire Chief, Cincinnati Fire Department. Like the Chief said, at 03:30 we started receiving calls for a fire. We had some conflicting reports that there was a vehicle fire on top of the bridge and a fire below the bridge. The fire was below the bridge in the Thousand Hands Playground, as Chief stated. That fire, the heat from that fire actually extended up and caused a fire on the bridge itself and in some of the structure around the bridge, which the Department of Transportation will discuss in detail. The fire was extinguished by our firefighters. We had about 60 firefighters on scene, and we are glad to report currently there are no injuries. The cause of the fire remains under investigation. There was a lot of damage to the playground structure and to that area, so it takes us a while to go through the fire debris to determine a cause, but our fire investigators are on scene and they're being supported by Cincinnati Police and some of our federal partners as well to make sure that we have a good cause and origin of that fire, but there's no known cause. We're happy to report that there was no vehicles that were impacted on the bridge or damaged. There was no hazardous materials that we know of that were released in any way. We've been working with the Metropolitan Sewer District to confirm that the sewer system is safe. There was no impacts to any of that infrastructure. Duke Energy has been on the scene with us and made sure that the utilities in the area are secured. We have had no loss of utilities or power in the area from the fire. I'm going to turn it over now to the Ohio Department of Transportation.
Just real quick,
I'll get back to you.
All right, good morning, everybody. Matt Bruning, I'm the press secretary for the Ohio Department of Transportation. We don't have a lot of details yet. We still have inspectors that have been here on the scene for a couple of hours, but we're still trying to get access up into the close area of the bridge, maybe up on top as well to get a good detailed look. As of right now, the goal is to get the northbound side inspected first. We think there's less damage there, so we're going to try to get that inspected first. The southbound side is going to remain closed until further notice, though. We have some significant damage on the Ohio approach to the bridge. At least 3 beams will need to be replaced on that portion of the structure. That will also necessitate the replacement of a portion of the bridge deck. And there's also a sign truss up there that was damaged in the fire, so that will need to be removed and replaced.
At this time, we'll take any questions that you might have.
Some of the beams seem to be...
Okay, hold on. Let's start right here.
Some of the beams seem to be sagging, almost as if perhaps they would be melted. Is that...
Yes, the fire was a very large fire that put out a lot of BTUs, and so because of the source of the fuel that was involved in it, it created such a large source of heat that it began to compromise some of the integrity of the structure. And so we have our partners here working with us to determine the safety issues that are concerned with those.
What was that made of, that playground equipment?
There was several different materials, synthetic materials primarily, and so a lot of plastics were involved. Some wood was also involved in the structures.
Yeah, because wood itself is not hot enough to burn steel, is it?
Wood can be. It just depends on the amount of fuel source that it has, the amount of wood.
I know you said the cause is under investigation. Any preliminary findings that this might have been intentionally set?
Right now, we don't have any indications one way or another, and our investigators are currently working to try to determine the cause and the point of origin where the fire actually began.
What's the distance between the ground and the bottom of the deck?
It appears to be close to 40 feet. And, yes.
Okay, Matt, I got a question for you, sir. You said you need to replace. Is there any source of ignition you can determine? Is there any electricity going to that area? Is there anything that could have sparked this fire that you know of?
Well, that's still being investigated, and so electricity to the other parts of the park haven't been compromised. So we're still investigating to try to determine, the ignition source of the fire.
Was there electricity that ran to that?
There's electricity in the area. They have lights in the park, and so obviously they were fueled. But those sources were underground.
So do you think this was something that a person, like maybe it was a homeless person at the play area, or is there any indication that it could be
Well, we really want to be careful before suggesting that that could be a possible cause, but we're looking at all options of how the fire started.
Can you talk about like what was the main source of fuel for the fire? Was it like the mulch? Was it the actual structures? Like what was actually the thing burned?
Right, it was everything, and so that's why it produced so much heat, because we had different, from the mulch, from the different plastics and synthetic material that were involved in this fire. That is which caused such a large fire.
Do you know if it was wood mulch or was it rubber mulch? Or
I don't know that.
You said it was very high BTUs. You got an estimate?
Because of some of the damage, and it's just an early assessment, we're talking about thousands of degrees because the way that it impacts some of the structure material, some of the spalding that we saw from the concrete, and some of the early videos that we were able to take a look at. We're talking probably several thousand degrees.
Is this trying to wrap your heads around, because the Brent Spence, the fire was on the bridge itself. This was 40 feet above. Can you explain how intense that has to be to bend steel 40 feet above?
Well, right, and it goes back to the question about the British thermal units, the amount of heat that was given off by this fire, and the fuel source. All those things contribute to that, and it's an open space which allows it to extend vertically much easier than it does in a structure fire. And so just because the fuel source was able to put out that much heat, that's why we saw a lot of the things that we saw from the footage.
Is this being considered suspicious at this time? Please? Corey, can you come up suspicious, Chief? Is this being considered suspicious?
No. Again, what we're trying to do is trying to determine the cause, and we'll be able to, after we're able to assess all the information that we have, we'll be able to address how this fire actually started.
You haven't ruled that out, though, being suspicious.
Okay. Hey, thank you.
You haven't ruled that out yet, though, being suspicious.
We haven't ruled anything out. Thank you.
Commuters are also worried about the longer travel to work.
It's a little stressed out, right? Because I use it every day. I know that's going to complicate the commute, and especially when the Brent Spence Bridge had its fire, that really disrupted a lot of things. So,
although it looked awful on the video images of when the fire was going on, we're hopeful that maybe it's more cosmetic than anything else.
A massive overnight fire shuts down one of the busiest bridges in the tri-state. No way. Thousands of drivers crossing from Ohio and Kentucky now faced with lengthy detours as the integrity of the Big Mac Bridge remains under question.
We have some significant damage on the Ohio approach to the bridge.
While investigators are now tasked with finding out how that fire started. Team coverage begins.
And that is where we begin tonight. All lanes I-471 are closed after that fire engulfed Sawyer Point Park and spread to the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge. You probably know it best as the Big Mac Bridge. Of course, you can see right there on the right side of your screen. There is no traffic north or south other than the emergency vehicle out there with flashing lights right now. This is normally at a time, of course, that thousands of drivers would be traveling out there in one direction or another.
The whole side is charred. It really is more the southbound lanes than the northbound lanes. But you get the trestle at the top that holds signs. It is buckled from the heat. Underneath, we know that there are at least 3 girders that probably need to be replaced. And down below, that is the playground. We say Sawyer Point Park was on fire. That is not accurate. It really was that playground area that was on fire underneath the bridge. We have video from the pickleball courts near the playground that show the moments that it went up in flames. In fact, we want to show you some pictures of what the playground looked like before this whole thing began, before that fire turned it into just charcoal. And you can see it was a really nice park, a playground. It was meant for children with disabilities, one of the largest of the time. It was mostly wooden and plastic. What you can't see is how large it really was. Now that playground has been pretty much leveled to the ground. The wood is charred, it's turned to ash. Those flames melted the metal off the bridge 40 feet high above that playground. Amazing. We want to bring in WC.
What stuck out to me, Tanya, is how intense the flames were to really cause this much damage. We are here on Pete Rose Way, and I want to show you from our vantage point what we can see. You see the 471 southbound side. It is charred and it is dented inward. That is really the only thing from our vantage point that would indicate anything is out of place. But once you get underneath the structure like we were earlier today, you'll see this fire caused a lot of damage. Black smoke billowing from the Big Mac Bridge.
Ain't no way.
Early morning drivers coming to a standstill.
That is ridiculous.
Down below in Sawyer Point, the Thousand Hands playground engulfed in flames. 60 firefighters on scene to battle the inferno.
The heat from that fire actually extended up and caused a fire on the bridge itself and in some of the structure around the bridge.
When the sun came up, damage to the Big Mac laid bare. 3 warped beams, blackened structures, and charred highway signs.
The goal is to get the northbound side inspected first. Closed until further notice, though we have some significant damage on the Ohio approach to the bridge.
The playground reduced to rubble.
Some of the early videos that we were able to take a look at, we're talking probably several thousand degrees.
Miraculously, there were no injuries to firefighters, no damage to drivers, and no hazardous materials.
What in the world?
But investigators are now looking into how a playground fire shut down a major bridge.
A fire under a bridge like this is a significant concern to us, and it's going to take a little bit to get that fixed and back open.
Focus on the northbound lanes. ODOT says the brunt of the damage is not actually as severe on that side. Inspectors started surveying the damage early this morning, and though it took them time to get on top of the bridge, ODOT shared some hopeful news just about an hour ago. Take a listen. And still no exact timeline on when we'll see cars moving into Ohio, but ODOT says they hope it only takes a few days. The same cannot be said for the southbound lanes. There is significant damage on that side. ODOT says several steel beams will need to be replaced, as well as part of the upper deck and a sign truss.
Ain't no way. What in the world? That is ridiculous.
Ridiculous is one way to put it. It is incredible to see that footage, scary to see that footage, as of course I'm sure he felt and many others who were driving around at that hour. So it is incredible to see it, and we have live team coverage for you here this afternoon.
Yeah, well, Kelly, this was a massive fire. No one could have predicted a fire this big coming from what was basically a playset underneath the bridge, but nothing says more about this fire than the beams. Take a look above, and you can see that there are these deformed beams very clearly underneath the bridge. Those are steel beams. This fire was so hot, it melted those beams from 40 feet below. Now, take a look underneath. The remnants of that playground setup, it's still smoldering under there. Firefighters are still out here making sure it doesn't rekindle. This is what it looked like at about 3:30 this morning. Flames came from underneath, engulfed the bridge. Fortunately, no one was injured. Firefighters say no hazmat in all this. It took more than 60 firefighters to get this under control. Inspectors say there are at least 3 major beams that need to be replaced. There's also deck work that needs to be done. Damage estimates already in the millions. The big question is, how did all of this start?
Right now, we don't have any indications one way or another, and our investigators are currently working to try to determine the cause and the point of origin where the fire actually began.
You haven't ruled that out yet, though, being suspicious.
We haven't ruled anything out.
Yeah, and this wasn't a small playground setup. It was huge. We have some pictures from what it looked like before. There was a lot of what investigators say was wood, plastic, various materials underneath fueling this fire. Now, transportation officials were here. They say they're going to inspect the northbound lanes first. They're hoping to get the northbound lanes open, and after that, they're hoping to work on the southbound lane. But again, that could be weeks, maybe even longer. They're still trying to get a grip on now that.
Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but investigators are still trying to determine what caused these flames on Sawyer Point's playground under the bridge in the first place. Now, because of how intense that fire was, part of the metal on the bridge is warped. Several steel beams need to be replaced, along with a section of the bridge deck. The closure reminding some commuters of when a fire shut down the Brent Spence back in 2020. could get backed up, so just make a plan, leave early if you can. We'll keep you updated on the investigation, traffic detours, bridge repairs, all of that here on air. You can also scan this QR code we've been showing you that will take you to WLWT.com for all of the latest information.
Thousand Hands Playground, which is believed to be at this point, the origin of the fire is obviously closed right now, but there are also utility workers that are trying to reopen the path that leads under the bridge so all of Sawyer Point can get opened up to the public as well.
But with the melted girders forcing a major repair of the superstructure and the investigation into how this fire started well underway, the reopening of the southbound lanes could be weeks, if not months, away. Currently, ODOT is using a robot dog to create 3D mapping under the bridge to aid in reconstruction. And we have discovered it was ODOT that in 2003 approved of the flammable recycled plastic playground and rubber decking under the bridge. We spoke this afternoon with the man who was director of the Cincinnati Recreation Commission at the time, now retired in Tennessee.
How did this fire start, and when will this park and, of course, the interstate reopen? These are the two burning questions that people still have.
Now, the Big Mac Bridge could take weeks and millions of dollars to repair. And this all started when the playground at Sawyer Point, that is right under the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge, caught fire early Friday morning. Since then, all southbound lanes on the Big Mac Bridge have been shut down so transportation crews can make emergency repairs. Now, this happened ahead of a busy weekend downtown as fans get ready to cheer on the Bengals today.
You couldn't get down the street.
All right, so some detours to be aware of, especially with the Bengals game day traffic. ODOT says southbound I-471 traffic is being diverted through I-71 and I-75 South. So if you are headed to the game, leave early, and you should expect some additional delays. Now, we will keep you updated on the investigation into this fire, the traffic detours, and the bridge repairs here on air. And then, of course, you can also scan the QR code that is up on your screen, and that will take you to WLWT.com for all of that latest information.
5:11 on this Friday. Take a look at this breaking news we've been following all morning so far. The Daniel Carter Beard Bridge is shut down after reports of a serious fire. This is video a viewer sent to us just a few minutes ago. You can just see how massive those flames are right now. Again, this is like underneath the bridge, it looks like, where this fire is starting, going over that bridge. So because of that, of course, road closures are in place right now. Peyton Marshall is on the scene. And again, we're going to be watching this and checking with her in just a minute. But first, let's get a look at your forecast.
Daniel Carter Beard Bridge, or the Big Mac Bridge. Southbound lanes of I-471 are still shut down. It's been almost 1 week now since that fire destroyed the wooden playground underneath, damaging, of course, the areas above on that bridge, ultimately shutting it down. WCPO 9 News reporter Sam Harrell-Simowitz is live at Sawyer Point tonight, where trails have been reopened. Sam, you're getting a closer look at some of the damage as well.
We are, Craig. We're a few feet from that work zone right now. This is the area where there used to be a wooden playground, and above there's melted metal and parts of the bridge is damaged. But I want to show you what workers are doing right now. They're putting in those flat metal surfaces. That's called footers. The Ohio Department of Transportation told me that those will be the base of shoring towers. Now, shoring towers will be put in to be able to stabilize this area to make sure crews can safely work to repair this bridge as the repair process gets going. Ohio Department of Transportation crews man the scene underneath the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge.
One of the biggest things we've had to work on is the design for the repairs that are going to take place, and we've also been working a lot on that design for those shoring towers.
The Transportation Department said they're getting ready to build shoring towers and plan to pour concrete Friday.
Right now we have a structure that is not safe. It isn't safe for people to be on the bridge or to be working under it, so we need the shoring towers to be erected to stabilize the structure.
As people pass by the rubble, they're stunned by what they see.
Well, I'm an engineer, and so, like I said, when a fire gets hot enough to melt steel 40 feet in the air, I want to go see what there is to see.
What was once a popular playground, now reduced to ash.
The fact that a fire in a playground can reach a temperature hot enough to melt the beams up there, which you can clearly see the beams are damaged.
But for drivers, the southbound lane closures still create more and more traffic. Some people are trying to deal with the backup by taking the Taylor-Southgate Bridge to Newport. Traffic is blocked off on parts of Pete Rose Way. ODOT reminding people to stay out of the restricted area.
We want people to know that that is wholly dangerous. That is a terribly compromised situation. We have a structure that is unsafe, and it is not stable. We don't want people under that bridge whatsoever.
The Transportation Department told me that areas of Sawyer Point are now open because areas of bridge above the trails aren't compromised.
While the Cincinnati Parks Commission has reopened most of Sawyer Point Park, the scars remain from a severely damaged bridge. ODOT continues to make repairs, but is not directly answering our questions about 2 warnings sent to state departments of transportation, one in 2018 from the NTSB that said, evaluate materials under bridges and remove those that could pose the risk of a fire event, and the other after a 2023 fire in Los Angeles from the Federal Highway Administration that said, any structures which utilize combustible materials cannot be allowed under bridges and should be removed. In a written response, an ODOT spokesperson tells us ODOT received the 2023 FHWA memo and it was immediately distributed to our 12 districts and structural engineers who were asked to identify any obvious combustible materials similar to the flammable material hazard in Los Angeles. The spokesperson said responses from our districts showed that ODOT had already been working to address several known issues well in advance of the memo.
The big question that was not answered was whether ODOT ever felt the warning memos applied to the Thousand Hands Playground. In fact, ODOT's answers to our questions really just raised more questions.
When ODOT approved the playground in 2003, did it consider the flammable nature of the recycled plastic structure, not to mention the rubber decking made of recycled tires? Why did it remove the structure after 2 warnings from the feds? How many other flammable structures are beneath Ohio bridges right now? ODOT says it does not want to answer further questions until the investigation into the fire is complete. Regardless, we will keep asking.
Why did officials allow a flammable playground underneath the ramp to the Big Mac Bridge? It is the question the WCPO 9i team is seeking for answers to.
And investigative reporter Paula Christian discovered that federal transportation officials actually issued a warning a year ago about storing flammable materials under a bridge.
To the flammable material hazard in Los Angeles.
There was no warning about playgrounds. There was a warning about things stored under bridges. That's what we were looking for, was things stored under bridges.
ODOT would not comment on the Cincinnati Bridge fire or the playground because, quote, we are waiting for Cincinnati Fire to complete their investigation and determine what happened and how it happened.
I mean, it looked like a blowtorch underneath that bridge.
Casey Jones owns an engineering consulting firm and tests bridge foundations during construction. He's been following the Big Mac Bridge fire and even profiled it on his YouTube channel.
It's a hugely important bridge. I think there has to be a mindset of pretty much zero tolerance for anything that puts an important bridge like that at risk.
He says playgrounds have wood, plastic, and rubber cushioning like a Thousand Hands Playground that can burn at very high heat.
Plastic, rubber, those are all petroleum products. And if you can get them to ignite, they'll burn at very high temperatures very rapidly, almost explosively.
He says the bridge ramp will likely stay closed for at least 2 months and maybe longer, depending on the extent of the fire damage, impacting tens of thousands of commuters.
What do you think the likelihood is they're going to rebuild the playground there?
0. Well, hi, everyone. There's another big bridge fire in the United States. This one occurred in Cincinnati on a bridge that goes over the Ohio River. It's called the Daniel Carter Beard Bridge, or known locally as the Big Mac Bridge. It's I-471 over the Ohio River. This fire occurred on Friday, November 1st, about 3:20 in the morning, and it was a result of a high-intensity fire of a children's playground that was located directly beneath the approach spans to the main span of the bridge. This bridge was constructed in 1976, and most of the damage occurred to the southbound lanes. Now let's look at some of this footage from a local news station. I'll have a link to this video in the description. It's just an unbelievably intense fire. Now, obviously, children's playgrounds don't go up in smoke for no reason at all. There's a lot of arson associated with these kids' playgrounds just due to all the miscreants out there. Local officials haven't indicated what the cause of the fire is, but I'd be willing to bet it was arson of this playground, likely the use of gasoline or some other accelerant that It's probably rubber mulch, but certainly the plastic, when exposed to an accelerant and ignition, can generate tremendously high temperatures, just like a flamethrower. It's unbelievably intense. There were no reported injuries. You can see the aftermath. So they immediately had to close down the highway in both directions. It took them we're coming up on the approach to the southbound lanes. You can see the paving for the pickleball courts, the green paving further up from this playground past the location of the bridges. So the Wikipedia entry for this bridge says this bridge is a twin span steel bowstring arch bridge, and that corresponds to the main spans crossing the Ohio River. And as I mentioned, the approach spans are supported by steel plate girders. Now, we've seen numerous fires associated with highway bridges in the last couple of years. We seem to have one about every 6 months these days. There's some pictures of the aftermath of the fire in the playground. Again, to me, this is no doubt an arson. Question is, well, obviously they have to confirm whether it's arson, but they also need to figure out who did it and why.
WT News 5's Brian Hamrick investigates what we're learning about the fire that sparked it all and whether a warning from the Federal Highway Administration was disregarded.
Under the I-71 bridge, echoes of the fire ripple along the riverfront. Speaking even louder is the sight of those digging for answers. A team from the Federal Highway Administration has arrived to a scene they've seen before.
It's a huge fire.
2017 Atlanta fire underneath I-85 actually collapsed the bridge there. And just last year, another fire under a bridge on I-10 in Los Angeles. Both so devastating, the FHA sent out a memo last November warning this, again, raises serious concerns about storing materials, including flammable, explosive, or hazardous materials under bridges. But given the amount of material under the bridge in the form of that playset, should they have seen that as a red flag? That is an answer they do not have yet, but they say they're working to get. After a fire that for the Federal Highway Administration is a deja vu disaster.
Brian Hamrick, WLWT News 5.
The fuel source was able to put out that much heat. That's why we saw a lot of the things that we saw from the footage.
Is this being considered suspicious for KYTC, please? Corey, can you come up here? Suspicious, Chief? Is this being considered suspicious?
No. Again, what we're trying to do is trying to determine the cause, and we'll be able to, after we're able to assess all the information that we have, we'll be able to address how this fire actually started.
You haven't ruled that out, though, being suspicious.
Okay. Hey, thank you.
You haven't ruled that out yet, though, being suspicious.
We haven't ruled anything out. Thank you.